So, ladies and gentlemen, this morning we're continuing our look at some of the key players of the 1970s and 80s. And again, Nathan Dawn, Kendall Giverson, Bobby Freeze, Bo Sheaves, my cousin Darren Doucette, who I consider like a brother. They always pick my brain as to what they'd like to see. Now, Kendall Giverson, I talked about a little bit about the lost stars of the 70s and 80s, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But here we're talking about, not say a lost star, but no one wants to really give him the credit where credit is due, because during his era, he was not only a multiple Stanley Cup winner, he was a good goalie and one of the biggest disturbers in NHL history. Of course, we're going to talk about William John Smith, aka Billy Smith, aka Battling Billy Smith, aka the blank that Gretzky came up with a nickname for. Now, Billy Smith was the number one goalie, or the top of the tandem, him and Chico Resch, in the 4-year Stanley Cup ring run for the Islanders in the early 80s. And of course, his other legacy, he was the first NHL goalie to be credited with scoring a goal. Now, there was minor pro goalies that had scored before, but he was the first one. Now, in the 2007 NHL Greatest Players in History list, he ranks 80th, and I think that's, top 75, pretty much, that's where he should be. Now, he was born December 12th, 1950 in Perth, Ontario, very nice community in central Canada. Only 5'10" and 175 pounds. He was literally more than 6 feet on skates. He was a dangerous leader in front of the net, because he basically saw his cage as his wheelhouse, and anybody disturbed it, he was going to take a stick, take a punch, do all kind of stuff to disturb the defenseman, the scorers, and a lot of players paid for it. Now, he came up in the LA Kings system. He was drafted 59th overall in 1970 by the Kings, and did spend some time with the Springfield Kings and the big club, but he was eventually drafted in the expansion draft by the Islanders in '72. But we'll get a little bit of that later. Now, where he was recognized, he had a very good final amateur season or junior season with the great Cornwall Royals of the Q. Now, the 2 years in the minor leagues helped develop his skill, and he helped actually Springfield, a very strong team at the time, win a Calder Cup in 1971. Now, AHL Calder Cups at the time were very prestigious, and him being the number one goalie on the winners drew a lot of significance. Now, there was some rumor that Smith was going to be drafted by the Islanders, but there was talk about a trade. The late Maple Leafs and Habs were interested in him as a backup. But, he became in great recognition because his first game, of course, he held off Montreal for most of the contest, but lost 6-5 to a late goal by Guy Lafleur, and that drew a lot of interest, because to have your debut game in the Montreal Forum and to be so successful and not really lose the game, but Guy Lafleur was always a sniper late in the game. Now, my old nemesis in this go again, Jerry Desjardins was the came over from the Kings as well. He was the dual goalie for the Islanders with Billy Smith. If anybody knows my disdain for Jerry Desjardins, he had all the talent in the world, but if he had a little bit of talent, especially when he was traded to Buffalo, talent to stop a game. Buffalo could have won the Cup in '75. You had to rely on that old pro Roger Crozier, no disrespect to Crozier, but Jerry Desjardins was such an underachiever. He could have been like a Brian Hayward or whatever, but we are talking about Billy Smith. So it was made the decision that Smith was going to get the number one position when Desjardins bolted to WHA. Now, that season in 1974-75, he led the Islanders to their first playoff appearance. And 74-75 was a breakthrough year for the Islanders, because, if I'm not mistaken, they were battling the Flyers for that position towards the final. But, they had lost in a very, very, difficult division. Now, when he became more and more into his game, His aggressive style, he had no like stand up, he had no butterfly. He just had the Billy Smith style. He had played the 1978 All-Star game, and he was named MVP. And that increased his ego, because a lot of players I've talked to about Billy Smith, he said, he was a great player, but his ego was quite strong. He had to be between the pipes in the 70s, especially a player that's kind of not say a Dominic Hasek style, but he was very interpretive. Now, for the rest of the decade, he shared time in the Islanders net with, of course, Resch, and they were considered, besides LaRocque and Dryden, the best goaltending duo in the NHL. Now, in 1980, a decision was made by the coaching staff of the Islanders to go with Smith all the way, and the Islanders used Smith's money goaltending to the first 4 consecutive Stanley Cups. His goalie style really came into prominence in Game 6 in the final against the Flyers, where he held off some good chances in overtime with a Ledger Nystrom goal. Now, he was named the first team All-Star in 1982 after Rush was finally traded, got more of the workload. He won the Vezina in first team recognition in 82. 83, he won the Jennings Trophy for fewest goals allowed, actually shared by the great New Brunswick goalie and future Montreal Canadiens goalie coach Rolly the goalie Melanson. He played in the 81 Canada. He was selected for the 81 Canada Cup, but he was injured in a pre-tournament game, and maybe that changed the forecast for the Cup that year, because Mike Louis played and he had a bad game against the Russians. I don't think Smith would have given up 8 goals against the Russians. Now, his regular season statistics really were irregardless, because the Islanders needed him to hold the fort when they couldn't score the goals they needed at the time. Islanders, very strong team at the time. Bossy, Gillies, Nystrom, Goring, all these great playmakers and scorers. But he was always, he brought his game to a different level in the playoffs, beating Minnesota, Vancouver. He helped defeat Edmonton in their first try for the Cup against the Islanders. He held Gretzky in check, and he actually helped the Islanders break an NHL record, because he won 19 consecutive playoff series from 1980-84, and that's quite significant, because when they're going to 20, Gretzky was too strong in 84, and that was the end of Billy Smith's run. But he had overachieved so much, and losing to Edmonton at the time with the great team they had was no disrespect. Now, why he stands out in NHL history, and it's not allowed now or not really promoted, he was the first goalie to win the Stanley Cup, which was, with a popular style of the time, the helmet and cage combination. Now, if anybody has ever worn a helmet and cage, like my buddies up home, some of the goalies in the family or extended friends, it was considered a little bit more visually appealing to see the puck, because the old fiberglass mask, which came in with Jacques Plante in '59, it became out of favor. Now, Smith did use a fiberglass mask early in his career, but he switched to the helmet and cage in '78, and that became his the distinct look. Now, the best game some people feel he ever played was a 2-0 victory over the Oilers in the '83 Cup Series. The shutting up Edmonton 2-0, despite the fact Edmonton had Messier, Gretzky, Curry, Coffey, Silton, and all these great players. Now, they swept the Oilers in 4 games in that series, where Billy Smith won the Conn Smythe by giving up only 6 goals. Now, a year later, unfortunately, with the loss to Edmonton, there was some good news. He broke the record for most playoff victories by a goalie, and in between '80 and '84, he was the playoff leader for goalies in every single category. All the major ones he was led. Now, in '85, he made history again, where the Islanders were down 2-0 to the Caps in the best of 5 series, and he won 3 straight games, and the Islanders advanced. Now, the term that Smith is also called on upon, he's what you call a money or a clutch goalie. Now, a money goaltender is not like a regular goaltender like Carey Price. A lot of people believe Carey Price is not a money goalie, and this is the differences. In a regular season, you only have to do what they have to do, but in the playoffs, it's a stone wall. And a lot of people can tell you Billy Smith was a money goalie in every level. Now, his sense of self-perfection led to a lot of writers, including Stan Fischler and different hockey news and book writers at the time, to say his ego got him through. Because some people believe that Smith had a sense that he needed to be perfect at the right time, and that self-awareness. Most journalists have it. You have to be at a certain level at a certain time. And that's why I relate to Billy Smith. Being a journalist is not easy, but you got to have to carry a little bit of ego to give you the confidence to fill the assignment. The same thing with Billy Smith. He had the confidence to go into opposing rinks, including teams that were better than the Islanders, and beat them. Now, here we see more and more history being made, but we're going to go back a couple of years in Billy Smith. Talking about that first person to have a goal. On November 28, 1979, when they were playing the Rockies, Rockies took out a player for an extra attacker, and it was a delayed call. And the puck deflected off Smith's chest protector. And Colorado rookie Rob Bramans made a blind pass to the blue line. And because nobody on the Islanders touched it and away in the net, he was credited with the goal. Under NHL rules, the last player to touch a puck when it goes in is credited, and Billy Smith got the goal. Later on, Hextall and different goalies used the what he called the dump approach, including Berleur, to put the puck in. But Billy Smith is so ironic. One of the most hated players, or the player that he didn't want to face, broke that record. Now, in '89, when he retired, 17 years in the league, he was the last original Islander to be still on the team. Now, he stayed with the Islanders as a goaltending coach for almost half a decade, and he later went on to be goalie coach for the Panthers after Bill Torrey moved to Florida, and he retired from that position in 2000. And that gave him a full 30 years at the NHL level. Now, his number was retired on February 20th, 1993, number 31 by the Islanders, and well-deserved. And he became the only goalie inducted in the Hall of Fame in the 1990s, which is quite ironic because a lot of great goalies from the 80s, but they didn't end up in the Hall in the 90s or into the 2000s. Now, Billy Smith, I said before, he's called Battling Billy, and he's also they call him the Hatchet Man, and some rinks would play certain music from The Exorcist or Friday the 13th when he would do something like that. He had a fiery temper and, using his stick and blocker, but, he was protecting his crease. I don't think he had direct malice against the players that he was playing against, just the way he was. He came up in the AHL, the Q style, you're going to protect your crease. Because you remember at the time there, when he first came in the Islanders, there wasn't many goons that could protect him. They might have had Pat Price or, some of the other players. Brian Spencer was there for a while, but he later moved on. So Smith maybe got paranoid. He had to protect himself. Now, he would also... they also saw the NHL taking a dive. He was the Greg Louganis of the NHL. He knew how to draw the penalty. And, he's an equitable goalie. Like I said, he hated everybody. Now, giving an example, in the '83 Cup final, he drew a 5-minute penalty against to Glenn Anderson and the Oilers after taking a dive, and Van Helmond basically said that Smith made a fool of him. And of course, in 1984, when the Islanders finally lost to the Oilers, Anderson and Smith hit up again, where Anderson ran the crease, and Van Helmond, and he said that in published reports, he never gave a penalty to Smith. So it would work and it wouldn't work. Now, Smith, of course, was also noted for not doing the traditional handshakes between teams at the end of a playoff series, and which only became in 1984. Because, I really think the Islanders thought they could win 5 straight cups to tie the Montreal Canadiens of the modern era. But I don't think Gretzky could have been stopping that last year. You learn when you lose sometimes, and that's what was '83. They learned how to beat Smith, because Smith was kind of intimidating to certain players, but 1 or 2 years more of experience with that young older team, Smith became, manageable or malleable, as we say. Now, But it was, it was a career that, that had many, many, many highs, just a few lows. But I mean, if you look at his resume, I mean, it's just amazing. And I really believe he was with the Montreal Canadiens and Toronto Maple Leafs to do what he did. It would be beyond and beyond for recognition. But you know something? If you look at these stats, these rough stats in the regular season, right? You're seeing, three and a half goals a game, in the low, in the high fours and stuff like that. But he came up on an Islanders team, and he went from 7 wins in his first season to 20 and 30 throughout the years. And he basically made the franchise what it was, because as strong as the Islanders were, they were competing with the Flyers mostly for that what they called the goon team, or the overachievers, or what they called the bucket bucket lunch team. Even though they had Bossy later on, and Gillies and all that, and Trottier, of course. But my God, when Billy Smith was on his game, he thrilled the home fans and road fans, especially in Toronto. Montreal, he never got ragged on too much, but he went to Toronto. And I remember a game against Calgary that I watched. I think either Jim Houston or Don Whitman was announcing. And Don Whitman said, well, if Smith went up to the stands right now, they would burn him in effigy or put him on a stake like Frankenstein. Like, who could draw that type of ire even amongst announcers? Now, there's a very famous YouTube on Billy Smith, looking at his dives, looking at his slashes. There's basically between period interviews or post-game interviews. And he's a very erudite guy. He's a very smart dude. I mean, to be at the level he was, at the years he was, a player is good when the person has 4 or 5 nicknames. Like the nickname that Gretzky allegedly said in that famous incident in front of the net in the playoffs where, Smith attacked him. I can't say it, but it rhymes with puck place. But any goalie that I covered back in the day, no one would refer to Billy Smith as a skilled goalie or a high level goalie, a la the Carey Price style. I always bring up Carey Price because his style is perfect. The Mexicans style, the ole when he's stopping. But Billy Smith was the wall, and to get past the wall, you either met the wall, and like I said, people would verbally attack him, and he could back it up, man. When Billy Smith was in, I don't think if you would have kept Glenn Rush at number 1, Glenn was too much of a nice guy. I think he wouldn't have won all those cups. He was the Reggie Jackson of New York Islanders, because he took all that on his shoulders. He said, you guys go out and score, I'll hold down the fort, say like Mount Valor. So, career statistics, let's look at it. 680 games, 305 wins, a 3.17 average, but get this, in the playoffs, 132 games, 88 wins of all things, 88 wins, only 36 losses, a 2.73 average with nearly 7,700 saves, with a 905 save percentage. And the majority of the shots he saved were against the best of the NHL at the time. There was no cheap save with Billy Smith. And when he gave up a goal, it was a goal that he basically would make the opposing team regret wholeheartedly. So, on this beautiful Monday, we're expecting record warm temperatures to come into New Brunswick tomorrow, nearly 68 Fahrenheit or 20 Celsius. We tell you to keep your stick on the ice, but as we all know, Billy Smith kept his stick on the ice until he saw something pass, and he perfected the what he called the stick swing spin. When somebody would come behind the net, he would bounce the stick off, and it'll give a area where it go into the stomach or crotch area of the opposing player. He was, without a doubt, he's comparable to a knockout artist as a boxer. He was a knockout artist by making that big save, especially in the second and third period. You could get a cheap goal in the first period, but why the second and third period came along, he was there, as we say. So everybody, have a great day, and any requests, likes, subscriptions, please let me know. I'm always taking requests. But again, this Billy Smith request is a continuation of the great support of my readers and hockey fans and extended family. And too bad my cousin Darren Doucette couldn't do a dual podcast with me. He's up in Beresford, New Brunswick. A little shout out to him today. My aunt, his mother, hasn't been feeling well lately, so we tell Salome, we love you. You're one of the best cooks in the history of the province. I miss your meatloaf, and everyone should have a grandmother like my grandmother Salome. Have a good day.